Hi, my name is Spencer Snyder. I am very excited to be here on Breaking Points because I want to talk to you about something that I think is very important. Now, this is George Santos, but I am sure you already know all about this guy. You know that he never worked at Goldman Sachs. You know that he was connected to a Ponzi scheme in Florida. Not only did he claim to go to a college he never attended, he lied about being a star athlete there. I mean, this is like a George Costanza B story. It's all crazy. But as egregious as the lies are, and as interesting as it's going to be to watch the investigations play out, I think there might be a slightly bigger lesson in all this. Now, before we get to the narrative that I think is largely missing, we have to ask, what about our political vetting system is so broken that it failed to weed out such a profound liar? Because it's not like people didn't know he was a liar before the election, and actually, quite a few people knew something was up.
Look, I sat down and I had lunch with him 3 years ago for about an hour and a half, and I asked a lot of very detailed and focused questions, and he was evasive and weirdly bragging and egotistical, and it, right from the start, it just sat wrong.
Okay, so that's Grant Lally. He publishes a small paper called The North Shore Leader on Long Island. So he was talking about getting a bad feeling a few years ago. And we're gonna come back to him because he represents kind of a special player in this, but he was not alone. Josh Eisen, a small businessman running for Congress in Westchester, met Santos often on the political club circuit in 2019 and 2020, and remembers Santos frequently bragging about his gonzo fundraising numbers, saying that he was bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then I would look in his filings and see that it was a 4-figure quarter. Santos is bragging, of course, about funds he was bringing in for his 2020 campaign against Tom Suozzi, and a couple things happened here. First, some people allowed themselves to assume that because Santos made it out of a campaign against Tom Suozzi unscathed for the most part, that's evidence that opposition research didn't turn out much. Except, Suozzi didn't do much opposition research, and second, it turned out that Santos was a huge sore loser. Because one of the first things he did was start a fight with the chairman of the Nassau County GOP, accusing him of sabotaging the election, and then, despite being on track to lose, he went to the new congressional member orientation in Washington anyway. He refused to leave the orientation once he officially lost, and obviously this all made his own staff start questioning his sanity. So already he had developed somewhat of a negative reputation. Fast forward to his second attempt at the seat. It's 2021, and an aide of Santos is caught impersonating Kevin McCarthy's chief of staff. McCarthy apparently knew about this, but this doesn't stop him from getting his first major endorsement in August of 2021 for his second campaign. Elise Stefanik, one of her aides, even started assisting with Santos's campaign. Multiple Republican operatives in Washington and New York told CNN that they found it implausible that Stefanik had not been aware of Santos's falsehoods, given rumors about Santos had been passed around in GOP circles since at least the summer of 2021. So let's put her and her team in the probably heard some rumors category. Now, it's around this time that allegedly the first big bells were rung and ignored. A former advisor to Santos learned about a business he was involved with in Florida, an alleged Ponzi scheme, among other suspicious businesses. So, taken with the rumors he was most likely aware of, the advisor said he took the findings to a state party official later that fall and tried to pitch the story to a newspaper, which he said did not pursue it. A newspaper not pursuing something. Let's remember that. Okay, so we're making our way through 2021, and as is common for a campaign to do, they commission a vulnerability report. So a firm, Capital Research Group LLC, put together a report that apparently revealed quite a bit of information. It's not out in the public, but it was bad enough that on December 1st, 2021, people working with him called a meeting. And their message to him was basically, game over, either quietly drop out or wait until all of this information comes out and destroys you. Can you guess what happened? Because he came back a few days later and expressed that he wasn't worried. It was gonna be fine. And members of his campaign must have been shocked at his inability to understand what was happening. Because these aren't just rumors now, people close to him know things. And according to the people the Times spoke with, most of his team just quit after that. That's not a fun way to enter Christmas. Going into the new year, 2022, Rumors are circulating, people are warning other people, but none of this makes it to the press in a meaningful enough way. Dan Constan, a close ally of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who leads the Congressional Leadership Fund, the main House Republican super PAC, also confided in lawmakers, donors, and other associates that he was worried information would come out exposing Mr. Santos as a fraud, according to two people with knowledge of the conversations. That leadership fund did not support Santos's race. But it doesn't sound like Dan Constan was calling his friends at the Washington Post either, so maybe he was waiting for the Democrats to do the dirty work, or someone else, or Santos would just implode on his own. Who knows? But in the summer of 2022, the DCCC puts together an 87-page book of opposition research. This should have uncovered everything. The Republicans will confirm all their suspicions without having to throw their own under the bus, and the Democrats will win the seat as was expected. This report was not that. It missed a bunch of stuff. It's written at various places in the DCCC report that more research needs to be done. So taken all together, you have politicians who are suspicious. You have donors who are skeptical. You have campaign staff who are willing to completely break off from the campaign. And yet, somehow, this didn't really come out until after he won the general election. Now, there were other articles that reported on Santos. The Daily Beast did some really good work, but it was really just one paper, the North Shore Leader, that came out before the general to say unequivocally, this guy is a fake. This person, Grant Lally, called it years ago. So the question becomes, why did a small local paper get it and pretty much everyone else missed it? Well, Santos's opponent, Robert Zimmerman, told the Times his campaign tried to prod reporters at local and national news outlets with leads about Mr. Santos, but had little luck. The response we got back pretty universally was they just didn't have the personnel, the time, or the money to do it. One person said to me, there are 60 to 80 crazy people running, we can't investigate them all. Okay, but why? Why aren't there more reporters allocated to second-tier races? Why was most of Santos's staff able to quit without being noticed? The answer to all of this is very simple. For-profit news sucks. And actually, the massive coverage of George Santos now that all of his secrets are out perfectly explains why there was such scant coverage of him before. He was not a proven news item before. If you are reliant on ad dollars and viewership equals ad dollars, you and your network are deeply concerned with what is captivating and entertaining, and who has proven themselves as more of an entertaining news item than George Santos.
Some acknowledge to me that, and to our team, that frankly, it's only a news story if he gets elected.
He's an epic fraud, and we've all been given permission to hate him. Consider how much money, how many salary dollars have been spent on coverage of Santos recently. Now, how much of that, if you click on CNN or MSNBC, how much of it has been completely needless and redundant and you've learned nothing from it? Now, that's cable news' thing. Most of the time, they just senselessly cover a handful of big-ticket items. You can really only rely on them to amplify a story, maybe. Now, as far as national print goes, the Times obviously did some great work after the fact on this story, but they too have similar ad pressures, and they have a profit directive. And on top of that, it's true they don't have infinite reporters to throw at every single lead. But for what we're talking about, there's a bigger issue. This is a map that shows all the counties in the US and how many newspapers they have. The areas in yellow have one newspaper, and the areas in red have none. And keep in mind, this doesn't indicate the budgets of the papers. The reason the North Shore Leader was special in its reporting on Santos is because they're plugged into the community and the political scene. Of course they beat the national outlets. That's their function. This is why local papers are important. But they do have limited resources.
But we're a small weekly newspaper. We have a dozen part-time reporters, some who do investigative work, some are actually high school kids. Yeah. So
part of their staff are high schoolers who probably can't do investigative work past 8:30 on a school night. Now, you look at these areas in red, they don't even have that. So there's this thing called coverage density, and it's basically the ratio of people in a given area to reporters in that area. And in the last 20 years, coverage density is way down. On average, for every $100 million spent by state and local governments, $100 million, there's only one reporter scrutinizing it. And there are a few factors you can look to for why. One is that papers have been really hurting by the sharp drop-off in advertising and classifieds. But another is that hedge funds own half the newspapers in this country, the most notorious of which is probably Alden Global Capital. Basically, if they buy your newspaper, it's time to get your resume together because they are known for gutting newspapers. In another video on my channel, I touched on a particular story of a paper that had about a dozen people on staff when they were acquired by Alden. Their newsroom was destroyed and ended up being cut down to just one reporter who was responsible for covering every aspect of their community. So when a George Santos emerges in one of these red areas, what happens after every politician who encounters him says that they knew something was crooked, but ultimately thought someone else would take care of the taxing work of exposing him, or they go to their local paper and there's only one reporter working there? Well, unfortunately, one possibility is that that crooked person goes to Congress. So for me, that's the big picture takeaway, because yes, George Santos is a fraud and a liar, and everything surrounding his story is crazy and worth examining for sure. However, he will ultimately leave Congress. He might not even make it to the end of this term, but he was allowed to rise because everyone either thought that someone else would take care of the dirty work, or they went to the press only to learn that there wasn't actually enough press to go around. Eventually there was, but it was too late. He's already in Washington making decisions. So the only thing that's left is whether or not the next George Santos also benefits from a journalistic landscape that doesn't have the time or the resources or the interest, and unfortunately, that's entirely possible. But that will do it for me. I'm Spencer Snyder. If you found this video interesting, you can check out my YouTube channel where I talk about the media and politics and other interesting things. Link in the description. Obviously, make sure you are subscribed to Breaking Points. Liking and sharing always helps. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.